She was lost in the desert, and the Apache said, "I'll rescue you, but only as my wife." She had always loved quiet places. Wide open land made her feel calm, as if the world was bigger than her worries. That was why she agreed to travel through the desert that summer. It was not meant to be a dangerous adventure. It was only supposed to be a shortcut on her way to visit a friend in a nearby town. She had checked the weather, filled her car with fuel, and packed snacks and water. Everything seemed planned and simple. The morning she left, the sky was clear and bright. The sun rose slowly over the sandy hills, painting the land in soft gold. She turned on the radio and smiled, feeling free and confident. The road ahead looked quiet and peaceful. There were no tall buildings, no heavy traffic, only endless space. She rolled down the window and let the warm air brush against her face. At first, everything went smoothly. The road was empty, but that did not worry her. She had driven through lonely highways before. She even enjoyed the silence. It gave her time to think. She thought about her future, about the dreams she had been pushing aside. Maybe this trip would help her clear her mind. After 2 hours, she noticed something strange. The road signs became rare. The path looked less like a highway and more like a rough trail. She slowed down, checking her phone for directions. There was no signal. She frowned but told herself not to panic. It was probably just a temporary loss of connection. Then it happened. The car made a sharp, unpleasant sound. The engine shook. She quickly pulled over, her heart beating faster. Dust rose around the vehicle as it came to a stop. She turned the key again, hoping it was nothing serious. The engine coughed but did not start. She tried again. Nothing. For a moment she simply sat there, staring at the steering wheel. The desert was silent, almost too silent. No cars passed by. No houses were visible. Only sand, rocks, and distant hills surrounded her. "It's okay," she whispered to herself. "Just stay calm." She stepped out of the car. The heat hit her immediately. It felt heavier outside than she had expected. She opened the hood, even though she did not know much about engines. She looked at the wires and metal parts, hoping something obvious would appear, but everything looked confusing and unfamiliar. After several minutes, she closed the hood and wiped sweat from her forehead. She checked her phone again. Still no signal. She looked around carefully. The road behind her was empty. It felt like she was the only person left in the world. She returned to the car and drank some water. She decided to wait. Surely someone would pass by. Even in remote areas, cars eventually appear. She told herself that help would come soon. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher, burning hotter. The inside of the car became uncomfortable, so she stepped out again and stood in the small shadow beside it. She tried waving whenever she imagined seeing movement in the distance, but it was always just heat waves rising from the ground. By late afternoon, worry began to grow inside her chest. She counted her water bottles. She had packed enough for a normal trip, but not for days in the desert. She forced herself to drink slowly, taking small sips. As the evening approached, the temperature slowly dropped. The sky turned orange, then deep purple. The desert, which had felt hot and bright during the day, now felt cold and lonely. She locked herself inside the car and tried to rest. That night was harder than she expected. Every small sound made her jump. The wind brushed against the car. Sand shifted. Somewhere far away, she thought she heard an animal cry. She hugged her arms around herself and tried to stay positive. Morning would come. Someone would find her. When the sun rose again, she felt tired and thirsty. She stepped outside and looked around with fresh hope. The new day felt like a second chance, but the road was still empty. She realized she could not just sit and wait forever. What if no one used this road? What if it was an old path that people no longer traveled? She made a decision. She would walk. Dad. She packed her bag with water, snacks, and her phone. She locked the car even though there was no one around. It felt strange leaving it behind. The car had been her safety. Now she had only herself. She chose a direction and began walking. At first, she felt strong. The morning air was cooler, and she walked at a steady pace. She told herself she would find something soon. A house, a sign, even a small shelter. But the desert plays tricks on the eyes. Hills that looked close were actually far away. Shiny surfaces that seemed like water disappeared as she approached them. The sun climbed higher again, and the heat returned stronger than before. Her steps became slower. Sand slipped beneath her shoes. Each step felt heavier than the last. She tried not to think about fear. Instead, she thought about her family, about how worried they would be if they knew where she was. She promised herself she would not give up. Hours passed. Her throat felt dry even though she drank carefully. Sweat covered her skin. The sun burned her face. She looked back once, but the car was no longer visible. That realization made her heart sink. For the first time, true fear touched her thoughts. What if I made the wrong choice? She wondered. She considered turning back, but she was not sure she could find the car again. Everything looked the same. Sand, rocks, open sky. There were no clear landmarks. The desert felt endless. By late afternoon, her legs were shaking. She found a small rock and sat down, breathing heavily. She closed her eyes for a moment, just to rest, but she forced herself to open them again. Sleeping under the hot sun was dangerous. She stood up and kept walking. As the day slowly moved toward evening, the light changed again. The heat softened slightly, but her energy was almost gone. Her thoughts became slower. Disgust, voices calling her name, but when she looked around, there was no one. Then she saw something. At first she thought it was another illusion, a dark shape moving across the sand. She blinked several times. The shape did not disappear. It was a figure. Far away on higher ground, she could see what looked like a person on horseback. The image was small, almost blending into the land. She could not tell if it was real or her tired mind playing tricks. Her heart began to beat faster. She raised her arm and waved weakly. The figure paused. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it started moving, toward her. She could not believe it. She felt both relief and fear at the same time. Who was this person? Would they help her? Were they even real? As the figure grew closer, she could see more clearly. It was indeed a man riding a horse, moving steadily across the desert as if he belonged there. He looked calm, confident, completely at ease in the harsh land that had nearly defeated her. Her knees felt weak, but this time it was not from exhaustion. It was from hope. She stood still, waiting, her heart pounding in her chest. The desert, which had felt like her enemy all day, now felt like it had delivered something unexpected. For the first time since her car had broken down, she was no longer alone. And as the rider approached, she realized that her survival might now depend on a stranger she had never met before. The rider came closer with calm and steady movements, as if the desert itself guided him. She stood still, unsure whether to wave again or save her strength. The horse's steps were smooth and confident on the uneven sand. In only a few moments, the man was near enough for her to see his face clearly. He was not smiling, but he did not look angry either. His expression was serious, thoughtful. His dark eyes studied her carefully, noticing her tired posture and dry lips. He wore simple clothes suited for the heat and carried himself like someone who understood this land deeply. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently between them. She suddenly felt nervous. She had hoped for help, but now that it was here, she realized she was completely dependent on this stranger. "You should not be walking alone here," he finally said. His voice was calm and steady. She swallowed and tried to speak clearly. "My car broke down. I tried to wait, but no one came." He looked toward the horizon as if measuring the distance in his mind. "The road you were on is rarely used now. Most travelers take another route." That meant she might have waited there for days without anyone passing by. He reached into a small leather bag tied to his saddle and took out a water container. Without hesitation, he handed it to her. She accepted it with shaking hands. Water felt cool against her dry skin. She wanted to drink quickly, but she remembered not to rush. She took slow, careful sips. He watched her quietly, making sure she did not drink too fast. There was no impatience in his eyes, only awareness. "You are far from the nearest town," he said after a moment. "Walking without direction here is dangerous. The heat during the day and the cold at night can weaken even strong people." She already knew how close she had come to collapsing. "Can you take me to the town?" she asked softly. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the land again, then looked back at her. "My home is closer than the town. It is in the hills beyond that ridge." He pointed toward distant rocky shapes rising from the desert floor. "There you can rest." Relief filled her face, but his expression remained serious. "Before I take you, you must understand something." The wind felt colder now. "In my community," he continued, "we do not bring strangers home without reason. Protection carries responsibility. If I bring you there, you will not be treated as a visitor passing through. You will be under my care." She frowned slightly, trying to understand his meaning. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I just need help getting back." "I know, and I can help you survive. But if I take you into my world, it must be with honor." She looked confused. The words sounded respectful, yet heavy. He took a deep breath. "I will rescue you," he said calmly, "but only as my wife." Even the wind felt silent. She stared at him, wondering if she had misunderstood. "What?" she asked quietly. "It is not meant as pressure," he said, keeping his voice even. "It is the way I was taught. If I protect someone, I take full responsibility. Marriage, in my culture, is not only about feelings. It is about duty, safety, and respect." Her mind raced. This was not what she expected when she saw help riding toward her. She had imagined a simple ride to town, maybe a phone call, maybe a rescue team. Not this. She stepped back slightly, her legs still weak from exhaustion. "I don't even know you," she said honestly. "That is true," he replied, "and you are free to refuse. I will not force you. But understand this, the town is very far. Walking there is almost impossible in your condition. Even riding there today would be difficult before nightfall." She looked at the setting sun. The sky was already turning soft shades of orange again. Another cold night was coming. "I would give you water and direction if you choose to go alone," he added, "but I cannot promise you would reach safely." They were simple facts. She felt trapped between fear and logic. Staying alone in the desert was not an option. Walking farther without strength could end badly. Going with him meant stepping into a life she did not understand. "Why would you offer this?" she asked softly. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because I saw someone in danger. And because I believe when fate places a person in your path, you do not turn away. Project." His answer was not dramatic. It was steady, like everything about him. He studied his face again. There was no mockery, no impatience, only seriousness. He truly believed what he was saying. What if I recover and want to leave?" she asked carefully. "If that day comes," he replied, "we would speak about it with honesty. I do not believe in keeping someone unhappy." His response surprised her. She had expected control or strict conditions. Instead, she sensed a quiet dignity. The desert air cooled further. She felt a chill run through her tired body. She imagined spending another night alone, listening to unknown sounds in the dark. Actively, she imagined her strength fading further. Her thoughts moved quickly. She did not have the luxury of long debate. Survival came first. "I need time to think," she whispered. He nodded and remained silent. He did not rush her or repeat his offer. He simply waited, holding the reins loosely in his hands. The horse stood calmly, as if it had all the time in the world. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. She thought about her family. She thought about how close she had come to collapsing. She thought about the kindness in his eyes when he offered water without hesitation. Finally, she opened her eyes. "I will go with you," she said slowly. "But I want respect. I want honesty." "You have my word," he replied immediately. He stepped down from his horse and helped her climb up carefully. His movements were gentle, careful not to startle her. When he mounted behind her, he kept a respectful distance. As the horse began to move, she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The desert that had seemed endless now felt slightly less frightening. She was no longer alone. They rode toward the distant hills. The sky deepened into purple and blue. Stars slowly began to appear, bright and clear above them. The rhythm of the horse's steps was steady, almost calming. She held onto the saddle tightly at first, but gradually her grip relaxed. "Your name?" he asked after a while. She told him. He nodded. "I am Daniel," he said. The ride continued in quiet conversation. He pointed out landmarks in the dark, certain rocks, certain shapes in the hills. He spoke of the land as if it were a living companion. She listened, trying to understand this new world she had just stepped into. In the distance, faint lights began to glow between the hills. Small homes, simple and peaceful. "That is where I live," he said softly. As they approached, she felt her heart beat faster again. She did not know what awaited her. Acceptance, judgment, but she also felt something else. Hope. The desert had nearly taken her strength and courage, yet somehow, in its wide emptiness, it had brought her to this unexpected turning point. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if her choice would lead to happiness or regret. But as the horse carried her toward the lights in the hills, one thing was certain. The small settlement grew clearer as they rode closer. From far away it had looked like tiny lights resting between the hills. Now she could see simple homes built close to one another, shaped by the land instead of fighting against it. The air felt cooler here, and the wind carried a different scent, wood smoke and earth, instead of endless dry sand. Her heart beat faster again. She had agreed to come, but now reality stood in front of her. A few people noticed them arriving. They did not rush forward, but they watched quietly. Their eyes were curious, not unfriendly, just careful. I would... She suddenly became very aware of how different she must look. dust on her clothes, tired face, uncertain expression. Daniel helped her down from the horse. Her legs felt weak when her feet touched the ground. He noticed immediately and steadied her without making it obvious. His movements were calm, respectful. "This way," he said gently. He led her toward a small home made of natural materials that blended with the hills. It was simple but strong. A soft light glowed inside. Before entering, he paused. "You are safe here," he said quietly. Inside, the space was clean and warm. Woven blankets lay neatly folded. Clay pots and wooden shelves lined one wall. It was not large, but it felt cared for. "You can sit," he told her. She lowered herself onto a cushion near the wall. Her body ached from walking and riding, but she felt a deep relief just being indoors. A woman entered the house a few moments later. She appeared older, with kind but observant eyes. Daniel spoke to her in a language she did not understand. The woman glanced at her, then nodded slowly. Daniel turned back to her. "This is my aunt," he explained. "She will help you rest." The older woman brought warm soup and fresh water. The simple smell made her realize how hungry she truly was. She thanked her softly and began eating slowly, careful not to rush. No one asked her too many questions. No one surrounded her. That surprised her. She had expected whispers or judgment. Instead, there was quiet patience. After she finished eating, exhaustion took over. Daniel showed her a small sleeping space separated by a curtain. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "We will talk tomorrow." His words gave her comfort. He was not forcing anything. He was giving her time. That night, she lay awake longer than she expected. The bed was simple but comfortable. Outside, she could hear faint sounds, soft voices, distant footsteps, the wind brushing against the hills. It felt different from the empty silence of the desert. The silence had life inside it. Her thoughts would not slow down. What had she agreed to? Was she truly ready to become part of this world, or had fear pushed her into a promise she did not fully understand? She turned onto her side and stared at the faint light coming through the curtain. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. Protection carries responsibility. Marriage is about duty and respect. She had grown up with very different ideas. For her, marriage had always meant love first, choice first, time to build feelings. This felt sudden, unexpected. Yet she could not deny something important. He had saved her, not only by giving her water, but by offering shelter, safety, and dignity. He had not treated her like a burden. Eventually, sleep found her. When she woke the next morning, sunlight filtered softly into the room. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then everything returned. She stepped outside carefully. The settlement looked peaceful in the morning light. Children were walking with small baskets. A few men were preparing horses. Women spoke quietly as they worked near their homes. The entire place moved with purpose but without rush. Daniel stood near a wooden fence, speaking with an older man. When he saw her, he excused himself and walked over. "Did you rest?" he asked. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Thank you. Today you regained strength. No decisions are required immediately." She had expected pressure after arriving, but instead he was giving her space. Over the next few days, she began to observe life around her. She helped Daniel's aunt with small tasks, washing dishes, preparing food, organizing simple supplies. Though she did not know the language well, kindness did not require many words. People were reserved but polite. Some smiled gently when they passed her. Others simply nodded. She could feel their curiosity, but she did not sense hostility. Daniel spent much of the day working, caring for horses, speaking with elders, helping repair structures. He seemed respected by others. Not loud, not commanding, but steady. In the evenings, they would sit outside as the sky turned golden, tapping to talk more. She told him about her life before the desert, about her job, her family, her plans. He listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions. He told her about his childhood, about learning to ride before he could properly read, about understanding the desert's moods. He spoke of tradition with pride, but not arrogance. One evening, she gathered the courage to speak honestly. "Back in the desert," she began softly, "your offer felt like my only option. I was scared." He did not look offended. "I know," he replied. "Do you still expect the same answer now?" she asked. He looked toward the hills before responding. "I expect honesty. Nothing more." She studied his face. "Why marriage? Why not just help me return to town?" He thought for a moment. "Because when I saw you alone out there, I felt responsible. In my belief, if I bring someone into my protection, I do not treat them as temporary. I offer a place, not just a ride. She appreciated the clarity even if she was still unsure. Days turned into a week. Her strength returned fully. She no longer felt dizzy or weak. She could walk comfortably and even help with light outdoor work. And something else began to change. The fear she carried when she first arrived slowly softened. The people did not treat her as an outsider to be pushed away. They included her in small ways, offering food, teaching her simple words, showing her how to grind grain or weave small patterns. Daniel never pressured her about marriage again. He did not bring it up daily or remind her of the agreement made in the desert. Instead, he treated her as someone learning, someone adjusting. That unexpected patience made her think deeply. One afternoon, a traveler arrived at the settlement. He brought supplies from a distant town. Hearing the word town made her heart jump. That world was still out there. Roads, phones, familiar buildings. Daniel approached her later that evening. "If you wish," he said calmly, "the traveler returns in 2 days. He could take you to town." There was no tension in his voice, no disappointment. "You would let me go?" she asked. "I told you before," he answered. "I do not keep someone who does not wish to stay." That night, she could not sleep again. Now her choice was different. In the desert, she had chosen survival. Here, she would choose her future. She walked outside and looked at the stars. The same sky that had watched her struggle now watched her standing safely between the hills. She thought about her old life, its comfort, its familiarity. She thought about this new place, its simplicity, its strong sense of belonging. And she thought about Daniel, not as a stranger on horseback, not as a man who made a sudden condition, but as someone who had shown patience, respect, and quiet strength. For the first time since her car had broken down, she felt she was no longer choosing out of fear, and she knew that whatever decision she made next would shape the rest of her life. The next 2 days passed more quickly than she expected. The traveler who had arrived with supplies stayed in the settlement resting his horses before returning to town. Every time she saw him speaking with others, she felt a quiet reminder in her chest. That man represented her old life. Roads, cities, familiar faces, modern comfort. A simple ride with him could take her back to everything she once knew. Yet, when she imagined leaving, her thoughts felt heavier than she thought they would. On the morning of the traveler's departure, the settlement woke earlier than usual. The sky was still soft and pale when people gathered near the center of the small community. Horses were being prepared. Supplies were tied carefully with strong rope. She stood near Daniel's home, watching silently. Her heart felt divided. Daniel walked toward her. His expression was calm, just as it had been since the day he found her in the desert. "The traveler leaves soon," he said gently. "If you decide to go, I will walk with you." There was no sadness in his voice, but there was something else. Respect. For a long moment, she did not answer. She looked around instead. Children were laughing softly as they chased each other between the homes. An older woman was giving instructions about supplies. The hills surrounding the settlement glowed golden in the early light. This place no longer felt strange. It felt peaceful. "I don't want to decide because I am afraid," she said finally. "I want to decide because I understand." Daniel nodded. "Then take your time." The traveler mounted his horse. A few people said their goodbyes. The moment felt important, even though no one spoke loudly. She took a slow breath. "I'm not going," she said quietly. Daniel did not react immediately. He simply looked at her, making sure he had heard correctly. "You are certain?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "but not because I feel trapped, and not because I owe you anything. I am staying because I want to learn more about this life, about you, about myself." A faint softness touched his expression. "That is enough," he said. As the traveler rode away, she watched until he disappeared beyond the hills. Instead of regret, she felt something surprising, calm. Life in the settlement continued, but now everything felt slightly different. Her decision had given her a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just recovering, she was choosing to belong. The elders soon became aware of her choice. One evening, Daniel invited her to sit with them near a small fire. The air was cool and the flames moved gently in the wind. An older man with silver hair studied her with thoughtful eyes. "You have chosen to remain," he said in a steady voice. "Yes," she answered respectfully. "Do you understand what that means?" She paused before speaking. "It means I will not treat this place as temporary. It means I will respect your customs and learn with patience." The elders exchanged quiet glances. There was no pressure in their faces, only careful consideration. Daniel spoke next. I offered her protection through marriage, but I also told her the choice would always be hers. The silver-haired man nodded slowly. Marriage is not only a promise between two people, he said. It connects families. It connects responsibility. End quote. The words did not frighten her the way they might have days earlier. Instead, they felt serious and meaningful. I do not want to enter something blindly, she said honestly. I want to understand it. One of the older women smiled gently. Understanding takes time. That is wise. Over the following weeks, she began learning more deeply about the community's traditions. She learned how they honored the land, how they thanked the earth before planting, how they shared resources without keeping strict count. She saw how problems were solved through discussion rather than loud arguments. Daniel remained patient. He never used the word wife again in a demanding way. Instead, their connection grew naturally. They walked together in the evenings, speaking about small things, favorite childhood memories, personal fears, dreams for the future. She discovered that behind his calm strength was a thoughtful man who often questioned himself. He carried responsibility seriously, sometimes even too heavily. One evening, as they sat overlooking the hills, she asked him something that had stayed in her mind. When you found me in the desert, did you truly believe it was fate? He considered her question. I believe we are guided by moments, he said slowly. Some moments ask us to walk away. Others ask us to step forward. That day I felt I was meant to step forward. She smiled softly. I'm glad you did. Their friendship deepened into something warmer. It was not rushed. It did not feel forced. It grew quietly, like the steady roots of a tree. One afternoon, while helping Daniel's aunt prepare food, the older woman looked at her carefully. You are not here because you were saved, the aunt said gently. You are here because you chose to stay. That makes all the difference. Those words settled deeply in her heart. Soon, conversations about marriage returned, but this time they felt different. There was no urgency tied to survival. There was no fear behind the idea. Daniel approached her one evening with quiet seriousness. If we choose this path, he said, it will be because we both want it, not because of the desert. She appreciated his clarity. I don't want to feel rescued anymore, she said. I want to feel equal. You are, he answered without hesitation. The ceremony, when it was finally planned, was simple but meaningful. There were no grand decorations, no loud celebrations. Instead, there were close family members, elders, and quiet blessings spoken with sincerity. She wore a simple dress woven by the woman of the settlement. Daniel stood beside her, calm but with visible emotion in his eyes. As they stood together before the elders, she realized how far she had come. Only weeks earlier, she had been alone under the burning sun, unsure if she would survive another day. Now she stood surrounded by people who accepted her choice. The silver-haired elder spoke slowly. Marriage is not ownership. It is partnership. It is patience. It is shared strength. He was not the mysterious rider anymore. He was the man who had shown her respect when she was weakest, who had given her space to choose freely. When they exchanged promises, they were simple: to protect each other, to speak honestly, to stand together in both hardship and peace. As the ceremony ended, the community gathered for a quiet meal. Laughter filled the evening air. Children ran between the adults. The fire crackled softly. Later that night, she stepped outside alone for a moment. The stars shone brightly above the hills. The same sky that had once watched her struggle now witnessed her new beginning. She realized something important. The desert had not only tested her strength, it had led her to discover parts of herself she never knew existed. Courage, patience, openness to change. Her life was no longer the one she had planned before her car broke down. It was different, unexpected. But as she watched Daniel speaking kindly with an elder nearby, she felt steady. She had not been forced. She had not been trapped. She had chosen. And this time her choice was not about fear or survival. It was about building a future with trust, respect, and hope.